A very warm welcome to everybody to Rome. It's great to be here, and I'd like to thank the organizers of the conference for inviting me to be here today. It's a real privilege to share some ideas and thoughts about where I see the industry moving, and I hope that this becomes an interactive session. I'm going to invite questions from the audience at the end, so please think of some challenging and stimulating questions as we go through. A quick little bit of background on myself. I started life in the 1980s as a game designer and graphic artist on 8-bit computers, the Commodore 64, first computer that I worked on. Some of you may not have been born working on the Commodore 64, but it was a wonderful machine. And then I spent 16 years at Sony Computer Entertainment helping to build the PlayStation business around the world, in Europe, in the US, and in Japan. And then for the last couple of years, I've been a board member and advisor to some companies, and now have most recently started a venture capital firm with 3 partners to invest in the games industry. Because we see this, as Marco said in his introduction, this a fantastic moment in the history of our industry and the evolution of our industry. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of the changes and things that are happening in the future that I think will create value for developers, create value for publishers and operators of games, and ultimately create value and enjoyment and entertainment for the most important thing, which is our players. So this is definitely an industry in transition, an industry that is moving from traditional packaged goods, retail-centric industry where products are delivered, boxes on discs and purchased at stores, and it is now changing towards a service industry where everything is delivered digitally on the internet. Now, I don't think that is a revolutionary thought, but I think the speed of the transition is quite interesting. Depending on where you live in the world, there is no packaged goods industry anymore. If you go to Korea and parts of Asia, you will not find games to purchase in retail stores anymore. If you think about what's happening in the music industry and the speed at which the music industry is changing from a physical media industry to a digital service industry, that's a great early warning system for what is going to happen in our world as well. And we can already see the transition is happening. And one of the clear changes, I'll get onto in a little bit, but the important thing is that all of the growth, all of the additional value that is going to be created in our industry over the next decade is all online. And I think that that must be the focus of your attention if you're a developer. If you're thinking of starting a career in the games industry, you must think about how you can participate in this new world economy for computer games on the internet. So just focusing on one of those charts for a second, and there aren't too many numbers in this presentation, but I think this is a really important one. In 2008, I think it is proven historically that that was peak oil for the games industry. Now, what I mean by that is that was the moment at which packaged goods sales were at their highest ever. And they are now in a gentle but orderly decline. And all of the growth in the industry is in the network or internet or mobile or cloud part of the space. Now, that does not mean that packaged goods, console games or packaged goods, DS or Wii games are no longer important. They are important, but they are going to decline relative to the overall industry, and in some markets, very quickly. So where is the value in games today? One way of measuring value is to look at the financial performance of companies, and one method of this is the market capitalization. This is where you take the value of a publicly traded company on a stock market and look how much that company is worth to its shareholders. And if you take all of the computer games companies around the world that are publicly traded, meaning you can buy shares on a stock market in those companies, the total value is about $105 billion. Now, this number was actually measured in August of this year, so it will have changed a little bit since then. But the basic point is that $105 billion is a pretty impressive number, and that sounds like a huge value that has been created for its shareholders. However, if you add up the value of just 3 companies that are not included in this analysis, and those 3 companies are Google, Apple, and Microsoft, those 3 companies together are worth over $600 billion. So we are a tiny fraction of what is really happening in the world. Now, it's important to remember that not every computer games company is a publicly traded company. So this number does not reflect all of the value of all of the companies in the world. But it's just a good measure. It's a good analysis. But you can see that the online companies, the green segment in the upper left-hand corner, is already worth about 3/4 of the console industry in value. And this is changing rapidly. There's a huge shift from the console value to the online value. And most of that value is driven by Chinese companies, Asian companies, have very strong balance sheets in this area. In 2009, there was about $1 billion spent by venture capital companies or invested by venture capital companies in the computer game sector on a global basis. And you can see that 70% of that went into online and into the kind of business models that we're going to be talking about today, and less than 1% went into traditional PC and console games. So these investments are going to create the companies of tomorrow. These companies are going to be creating the new technologies, the new experiences, and the new game business models of tomorrow. And so this kind of investment will start to see big changes in the next 3 to 5 years in our industry. And this chart is deliberately complicated, so you're not supposed to be able to understand it. But I'll do my best to try and explain it. This is a map of the world as we see it. This was put together by one of my partners, Paul Hayden, to map the computer games online industry. And on the horizontal axis, going from left to right, is the diversity of the portfolio of a company. So diversity means how many games do they have. Sorry, on the horizontal axis is the core to casual trend. So on the far left is very casual games, and on the far right is very core and hardcore games. And up from bottom to top is the diversity. So the purple circle on the far right is Blizzard with World of Warcraft. So World of Warcraft is a very core game, and the company that makes it only has 1 game, so they're not very diverse. The size of the circle represents their revenue. So obviously Blizzard has a huge amount of revenue, and so you can see that they have a very large circle. Top left, in kind of the greeny brown color, is Zynga. Now Zynga has a very diverse portfolio, but they are also very casual in the games that they make. So that's how we map the world. So there's a lot of white space, and that means that is opportunity. That means that those are spaces that are not currently occupied by successful companies. So, you know, if you are starting a company or you're thinking about changing the strategy of your company, I would think deeply about how this chart could help you, or other data could help you determine the strategy for your business. And the new economy of games is more than just content. It's more than just making playable games. It is about creating technologies. It's about creating payments and analytics engines. It's about delivering products both on mobile and web browser, and also consolidating multiple products into being the new kind of publisher. And companies like BigPoint and CCP and Gameforge are great examples of companies that are totally dedicated to the online space. Companies like DNA in the mobile space, a Japanese social mobile company which is making big strides to move into the West. Now this chart is really, I think, where I'd like to spend most of my time today thinking about where our industry is moving. And what I've done here is to plot, once again, types of company from very casual to very core. But from left to right, on the x-axis, is the policy of the platform. And I need to explain what I mean by the policy of the platform, because this is an important point. If you want to make a game for PlayStation, you have to have that game approved and tested and managed by Sony. So you are subject to the policy of Sony Computer Entertainment. If you want to release a game on the iPhone through the App Store, you are subject to the policy of the App Store. There are certain rules and regulations that you have to follow, certain things that you cannot do in terms of content, certain things that you must do in terms of business model. And this is a massively oversimplified view of the world. And I know you could all argue, the relative positions of any one of these sectors. But the point is that you've got companies like Zynga, like Playfish, who are on the Facebook platform, which is a largely open platform and has very little policy to impose upon its content providers. But that is changing. So in fact, as days go by, the content that is published on Facebook platforms are becoming more subject to policy and are more subject to rules and regulations. And for those of you who play Facebook games, you may have noticed that Facebook have changed the rules about virality, meaning the way in which your performance or your achievements on games are shared with your friends. You cannot spam all of your friends with all of the games anymore. And this has progressively got more controlled over time. Apple just recently introduced more complicated rules and regulations for the content that they will allow on the App Store. And they are taking a more controlled view of the world. So the console companies, Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, have typically been closed platforms for the core gamer. Obviously, they have some games that are more casual, and Nintendo is definitely more casual than the others. But I think the battleground for the future, the opportunity for the future, is going to be in that upper right-hand quadrant. Who is going to be satisfying the needs of a core gamer on an open platform? And this is where we see opportunities for companies to create new businesses in this quadrant. And this is going to be games that are delivered perhaps in a web browser and perhaps in other formats. It is also a space that the other companies are going to want to move into. So the console companies, I believe, are going to want to figure out how to become more open to deliver more content without restrictions to more people to stimulate creativity when you are online. Apple and the mobile phone companies are going to want to capture the core gamer as their technology improves and you are able to deliver a more compelling game experience on a mobile device. And the social companies, as the browser improves, as the quality of what you can do in a web browser improves, are also going to want to move into that space.